BYL Nation, summer hoops are back. We're just hours away from tipping off our summer 2022 session. Tonight, we're going to have 200 plus hoopers converging on the Dana Barrows Basketball Club in Stoughton, Massachusetts. If you are not amped for this session, if you are not pulling up, if you are not tuning in, then I have to question, do you love basketball? And that's a serious question, right? Because if you're in the greater Boston area and you're not coming out for BYL hoops this summer, then I don't know that you really do, to be quite honest, right? The summer session is tipping off, and we usually do a playoff preview, but because this session is going to be so action-packed, we decided to bring you a summer preview as well. But before we get into that, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to pause and reflect on what has been an amazing first year, right? Because it's officially been a year that BYL Hoops has been in existence. We started last summer, and since then, we think about our elite division. We have had 4 former NBA players pull up and run with us. We've had hundreds of pros and collegiate players play in our elite division. We think about the legacy division. The legacy division has grown beyond my wildest expectations, right? We've actually doubled in size. The legacy division this past session, there were certain games that were averaging 50 to 60 fans in the crowd, an atmosphere like no other league in this area. And now we get to summer 2022, just a year later. Tonight, we are launching our first ever collegiate division. We've got 8 teams, 60 plus active collegiate players who are going to be pulling up and playing in a consolidated season for a BYL championship. And then next week, we'll be launching our first ever women's division as well. So I say that not to toot my own horn. Anybody who knows me knows I don't like attention. That's why I make my picture as small as possible here on these podcasts. But I say that to say thank you, right? Thank you to every player that's playing this session, this summer, to every player that's played spring, winter, or fall before, for everyone who has followed the page, for everyone who has liked the post. Sincerely, I thank you for supporting this league, for supporting the vision that we had for it, and for helping us continue to build. Right. And we're going to keep on doing that into 2022 and into 2023. But with that said, let's talk about summer, right? Because that's what's on top of everybody's minds right now is this summer session and the elite division and all of the talent that we have jam-packed into it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to try to get this in under 30 minutes. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to try to be as short-winded as I can. But our starting lineup, right? What are we going to talk about here today? We're going to get into some storylines around the elite division, around the league. Then we're going to talk about some players to watch. I mean, a lot of the players to watch are players that you already know of, but I'm going to talk about 3 specifically that are flying under the radar that I think are going to be impactful players this session. I'm going to give you a few hot takes. They're probably going to get me in trouble. They're probably going to be used as bulletin board material and fuel for certain players' fire. But I love that, and I hope that it is. And then last summer, if you remember, post-draft, I gave out draft grades. A lot of captains were upset with me over the grades that they received. I think I mostly nailed them with a couple of exceptions, but we're going to give out draft grades for each of our captains here this session, and then we'll conclude with some season predictions. So without further ado, let's get into some storylines around the league this session here. And the first question is, can Goonies repeat? Right, so the Goonies were our spring 2022 elite champions. They're led by Captain Tommy Hubbard. Now, because they won the championship, a rule that was implemented prior to the spring season is that you can keep up to 3 players from that championship team. So Tommy elected to keep his starting backcourt, which was a pair of Dominican guards from the Lawrence area, Hector Heredia and Daniel Almirante, 2 different players. Heredia is really a floor general, pass first, should shoot more than he does, but he's a willing facilitator for them, and he can stroke the 3 when necessary. And then Almirante is one of my favorite players in the league. He is a very scrappy, maybe the best on-ball defender. I mean, this summer, he's going to have to compete with Marcus Azor for that title. But I would say in the spring, he was definitely the best on-ball defender at the point guard position. So both of them under 6 feet. We'll see how that bodes for them this summer with some bigger guys coming through. But to keep that core and then add on, I mean, we'll talk about it when we get to draft grades, but to add Kwame Lee and Arinze Obiora to that core that already won a championship, can they repeat? It's tough to repeat. So you'll see in my predictions, I'm not pegging them to. However, I do think that they're going to get to the championship. I really do. I think that that's a really good team, and Tommy Hubbard is he's a much different player this summer or this time this year than he was last summer. I think last summer he was still playing his way into shape, might have been battling some injuries. But if you saw what he did in the championship game, you'll know Tommy's back. So can Goonies repeat? Only time will tell. I'm not picking them to, but I wouldn't be shocked if they did. Next storyline here. It's been a big overhaul when it comes to our captains. We are only bringing back from this past session Tommy Hubbard of the Goonies, the runners-up AJ Tavares of A1, and Savon Houston of Mambas. All other captains have either entered the draft pool or are not participating this summer. It's no mystery that the elite division in particular it got a little messy this past session, to be quite honest. Attendance was down. Guys just weren't taking it as seriously as they had in the summer and the fall and the winter beforehand. And there were, on the fly pickups, things like that. So we wanted to shake things up. We got some players who had been dedicated over multiple sessions, who have been high character guys and who are going to get on their teammates to show up. So we've got 5 new captains. We've got Amari Brown, who's going to be leading DBBC. We've got Rudy Jean, who's leading Nighthawks. Mike Gillespie is going to be leading the Minutemen. We've got Shane Coleman, who will be leading Kings. And then who am I forgetting here from that group? Well, we've got one more. We'll get to it when it comes time for draft grades, right? But 5 new captains. Jimmy Fritzen is taking over for Ballistic. So there are 5 new captains, really a big overhaul, the biggest overhaul that we've had since we've started. And then lastly here, just the talent influx. I mean, I alluded to it in the opener, but it's summertime, so college is out. Most pros are home here, and we're getting a lot of new faces, but then also a lot of returning faces who graced us with their presence last summer. You think about those 3, if you're watching this, in addition to just listening, you think of those 3 guards that we have there in the middle. I want to say that was 3/5 of our all-league team last summer, which was Mikey Rodriguez, our MVP from last summer. Apparently, a lot of captains forgot that fact, which we'll get to when it comes time to talk about the draft. But Mikey Rodriguez is back. He's teaming up with Aaron Calixte, who was probably the runner-up for MVP last summer. Both of those guys are pro. Mikey playing in Dominican Republic. Aaron's been overseas in Ireland. And then Mr. All-American himself, Marcus Azor, is back home, and he's going to be suiting up tonight as well after having led UMass Dartmouth to March Madness right in the D3. So having those 3 guards back just in and of themselves, they almost, or maybe should have went 1, 2, 3 in the draft. But then you add on guys like Kwame Lee is coming back, who took the spring off. Aaron Cooley is going to be playing his first session, right? He is a D1 player out of Brown University from the Boston area. 6'6", lefty. I mean, the influx of talent is just crazy. You can't say it's more than last summer because everybody was new last summer, but the entire first round are players that did not play last session. 13 out of the first 16 players, so basically 13 out of the first 2 rounds of picks were players that are either playing for their first time or did not play last session. So we've got a ton of talent coming in, which should make for some really competitive matchups this summer. When you take a look, it's tough to really even grade teams because there's no bad team this summer. I mean, even the team that we would rank last this summer is probably a top 4 team last summer. that just speaks to the level of talent that's coming back. So as far as players to watch, I mean, obviously everybody that I just mentioned, everybody who was a first or second rounder is a player to watch. But I want to give you guys some names of players who are flying under the radar that I think are going to be really impactful, that are going to be really fun to watch this summer. And it's a trio of guards that all of them were taken in the middle to later rounds. The first one that I'm going to mention is Ozzie Trail. So Ozzie is a lefty. He's out of New York. He played locally for Eastern Nazarene College. Got a chance to check him out a little bit at the preseason combine. Can shoot it from deep, handles really well, finishes decently. Be interesting to see how he finishes up against some of our 6'8", 6'9" guys in the league. But I mean, he can get up. He can throw it down on you, right? He was putting on a little dunk show after we wrapped up, and I think, especially where he's going to fit in alongside a bigger guard like Marcus Azor, the two of them playing alongside each other, I think that that's going to be a really, really nice pairing, and I think that that's going to open things up really, really nicely for Ozzie. He's going to get a lot of open three looks, and then Marcus is super unselfish, so he doesn't mind moving off ball for certain possessions, especially if Ozzie's got a mismatch to let him work. But they're both good passers, and I think Ozzie's going to be one of the funner players to watch. He's a speedster, he's a lefty. Can shoot from deep. He can throw down, especially in transition. So I look forward to watching him rock with the Nighthawks this summer. Another guard that I'm looking forward to watching, who is probably not going to be on most anybody's radar other than AJ Tavares as captain, is Alex Dubrow. And that's no knock to this man's game. I've been a fan of Alex's game for a long time, dating back to Foxborough High School. He is a throwback point guard, in my opinion. He's very much a pass-first point guard in score. I mean, he can score. He's got the side steps. He's got a bag, but he's really out there to try to set up his teammates, and he's a phenomenal passer. I can safely say right now he'll be one of the top 5 passers in the elite division this summer. He's not going to wow you with athleticism. He's not going to be soaring for dunks like Marcus Azor. He's not going to be flying by guys like Mikey Rodriguez. And he's probably not going to be, drilling 5 threes in a row like an Aaron Calixte. But what he is going to do is bring a high IQ brand of basketball that's going to fit well, really well, with AJ Tavares and the brand of basketball that his A1, formerly known as the Whalers, teams have prided themselves on. And, AJ, we always look at his teams coming out of the draft, and we undervalue them. And, he's now been to a championship. He's had a couple top 2 finishes, I want to say. And if he's going to outperform our expectations again, Alex Dubrow is going to be a huge part of that. And then lastly here is a guy who I feel disrespected for him, right? And I know that he feels disrespected as well. But this is Keyshawn Jacobs. Out of high school, he played for Morehouse College for a couple years, and then came over to Rhode Island College, where he proceeded to put buckets on pretty much everybody in his path over there. I mean, you can watch the tape from him. He's got a bag. He shoots from deep. I don't know how he was the last pick in the draft. Not exaggerating. He was the last pick in the draft, other than Mikey Rodriguez, which again we will get to. But other than Mikey Rodriguez, I think that this was the biggest slip for really no reason other than a lot of captains didn't know him. But they're going to know him as the season starts out. He ended up landing with DBBC. This isn't necessarily one of my hot takes, but I'll throw it in here anyways. I think it's going to be tough for Amari Brown to keep Keyshawn Jacobs out of the starting lineup. I don't think he's going to start off starting. I think that Amari's going to go a different way with that starting lineup, but Keyshawn's going to come in. He's going to start filling it up, and especially with his shooting prowess, which is probably one of DBBC's weaknesses, I think he's going to have to work his way into that starting lineup. I'm really excited to see him play, especially knowing that he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. So those are three names or three players to watch in addition to all the other talent that we're going to have here this session. So now let's talk about those hot takes. I've got three of them. So the first one is you'll see in my draft grades, this doesn't necessarily jive with them, but hot take is that DBBC is going to be a top 3 team in the league. Now, I have some criticisms for Amari Brown's first draft, but I think DBBC with their youth, I think they're going to be able to get up and down the court at a pace that most teams are not going to be able to keep up with. So outside of Ballistic and Goonies, I think that DBBC has a strong shot to be a top 3 finisher. Nighthawks might stand in their way, but I think I'm going to slide DBBC in there as the third seed. That's one of my hot takes here. Another hot take for this season. When we think about all league performers, right? There's going to be 5 of them. I think you can safely pencil in Aaron Calixte, Mikey Rodriguez, Marcus Azor. I think those 3 guys are shoo-ins for it. I think, next, when you think of Kwame Lee and Mikey Spencer, I think one of those 2 guys definitely gets in. Really, everybody in the first 2 rounds has a realistic shot at getting in there, but somebody outside of those top 2 rounds who I think could be a dark horse to get in there, probably nobody's thinking of, is Jose Mercado. And this is why I love Jose's game. Had a chance to play with him, had a chance to watch him a lot last season. I think he got lost in the shuffle with Ballistic last season because of them having Jimmy Fritzen and Terrell Williams, who were obviously going to be their top 2 options. Then add on to that the fact that Amadeus Pyrese is on that team, and he demands a lot of touches or takes a lot of touches himself. So I think Jose was sort of brushed aside a lot of times and didn't fit into the flow of their offense. But I mean, this guy is 6'4", 6'5", and a sturdy 6'4", 6'5", can finish at the rim, can operate back to basket, or can take you off the dribble. He can step out and shoot at a high clip. He's a very, very efficient player, strong finisher at the rim. And now that he's going to be playing in a system that's a lot more ball movement oriented than Ballistic was, this season Jose is going to be playing for A1. So he's going to be playing with the aforementioned Alex Dubrow and with Captain AJ Tavares in the backcourt, 2 very unselfish players. And then he's going to be playing with Obina Ugokazi. We'll have to see how he fits into that lineup. And then if we take a look here, I want to say he's also going to be sliding in with, let's take a look at their roster. Dante Ramos, right? So Dante Ramos is more of a bucket getter, but we think about Dante Ramos, right? Remember last summer, he had to share a court with Taylor Johnson, Renee Castro, and Mikey Spencer. So Dante knows how to play unselfish basketball. So I see A1 moving the ball really well. And, with AJ out there as the sniper, with Obina out there as a big body, I think that Jose is going to see a lot of open touches. And unlike last session, he's going to actually get the ball to be able to capitalize on those touches. So I'm not saying that he's a lock for being an all-league performer, but I think he's one of those guys outside of the first 2 rounds that could get there, that you look up week 5 or 6 and you say, he's averaging what? The season with what type of shooting percentages? That's the type of player that I see. And obviously I'm very biased towards efficient players versus high volume ones. But I think that Jose Mercado is going to take a major step forward with this squad this year. He might not know it yet, but I think he's going to really, really like playing for A1 more so than he did Ballistic. As far as a third hot take, I can't remember it. If I do by the end of the podcast here, then I'll go ahead and I'll drop that on it. But let's get into draft grades now. So we're just going to go in the order that teams picked, and we'll talk through these draft grades. So we're going to start with Minutemen. So their captain, first time captain, Mike Gillespie. Mike's a great player. He's a walk on at UMass, hence Minutemen. Very unselfish player. Probably should shoot more than he does. One of those guys. He went with his guy, Mikey Spencer, with the #1 overall pick. Not a bad pick by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm just going to pop out here and I'm going to drag our draft board so that we can really dig into these draft results at the same time here. But where I think Mike messed up, in my humble opinion, is when it came back around on the swing around for rounds 2 and 3, right? So when you look here, if you're watching, he got Mikey Spencer, and then I know he wanted Zach Turcotte with that swing back, but Ballistic nabbed him before he had a chance. So he went Dominique Langston, solid player, and I think he's really going to help them from the standpoint of moving the ball. He's a good passer, and he's going to give them a little bit of size too, because though he's a guard by nature, I think he's going to be more of a forward in this league and on this team. And then he went with Shaheem Hicks. Well, I'm very pro Shaheem Hicks, especially when it comes to you need shooting. If you're going to win in this league, in any of our divisions, you really need shooting, and Shaheem was one of the best shooters on the board still. But he, like many other captains, left Mikey Rodriguez on the board. And I just don't, maybe he's not familiar with him. Or maybe he, like some other captains who are familiar with him, just had a case of amnesia in the draft room. But you took Mikey Spencer and then you had a chance to pair him with Mikey Rodriguez and still get Shaheem. Imagine that lineup. Mikey Rodriguez, a shooter like Shaheem Hicks on one side, another shooter like Mikey Spencer on another side, and then a runner like Mike Gillespie. We could have been talking championship for this team. And now, unfortunately, I just don't see it that way. So, that's where I really think he messed up. He rebounded. He got Pierre, who had a really great session. We're hoping he can build on that, coming into the summer. But Pierre is more of a scoring guard. I don't look at him as a true floor general. I'm definitely going to catch flack for that. I know Pierre's not going to like to hear that, but I think he's at his best when he can go out there and just focus on getting a bucket. But that's not what the team here needs, right? I think that they really needed a floor general, somebody who was a more willing passer. So that might hurt them there, and that's why I've got these guys back. I gave them a C+ for the draft. When we look at their bench, they got Mark Willis and Chris Joyce, some good shooting off there with Joyce. You've got a really good defender as well. Noah Fleury, I don't know a lot about him, so he might be able to notch that up a couple grades here into the B range if he pans out and is a workhorse on the boards for them. But for right now, for Minutemen, sorry guys, but and sorry Mike, but I've got you at a C+. So let's move on here to Ballistic. I don't know how this team was assembled. I almost lost my mind when it came to the draft room. When we're talking about, last summer, there was so much attention around the Mikey Rodriguez versus Aaron Calixte matchup. Who truly is the best guard in the elite division? Mikey ended up winning the MVP. Aaron led his team to the championship, put on a performance for the ages, but unfortunately, Mikey Spencer, hit the shot. Unfortunately for Ballistic, unfortunately for the league, because that was a great moment. So the fact that now we come into the summer a year later and we see those two guards paired up, and not just paired up, but then to also have Jimmy Fritzen in the same backcourt, how do you guard that? That's my question for the rest of the league. Because you can be the Goonies, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and you can have, a potential stopper in a guard like Daniel Almirante. And you can have an Arinze Obiora, who's a very versatile defender. Maybe one of those guys can stop Mikey or Aaron. Even if you have two of them that can stop Mikey or Aaron, you don't have a third defender who's going to be able to stop Jimmy, right? So that backcourt, that's a three-headed monster that nobody, they won't say it. They're prideful. And there's other good guards in the league. I'm not saying that, but nobody wants to face that backcourt. Nobody. And I know that a lot of people are going to say, well, there's only one ball, right? And that's true. But I don't foresee these guys having any issue sharing amongst each other. Aaron and Jimmy are boys, love playing together. And Mikey's, just quite frankly, Mikey's going to be pissed off that he went in the third round of this draft. So, yeah, I mean, well wishes to the rest of the league this season, having to guard that trio. And it's more than just that, right? You have that trio. And then you've got 6'8" Zach Turcotte, who played at UMass. And then you've got a bouncy freak athlete like Justin Brooks. You've got a shooter like Chris Cherry, who's already got championship pedigree. And then you've got Jude and Chisholm as well off the bench, who are, guys who can come in and give you a few good minutes, give you a spell, but, they're not really high volume guys, which every championship team needs that, guys who are willing to put the needs of the team ahead of their own, playing time and touches. So, ballistic. I mean, it's no surprise. I give them an A. Really, I think if they could have got one more piece late in the draft with a little bit more shooting, to go to pair with Chris Cherry, I probably would have given them an A plus. But man, to have Aaron, Mikey, and Jimmy in the same backcourt, even if they didn't go get Zach Turcotte and Justin Brooks, that was already a championship contending team. The fact that they have that starting five, that's spooky. And I'll be interested to see how anybody guards that this season. So A1 next. One of the most unselfish brands of basketball in BYL, AJ Tavares, the heartbreaking overtime loss in the championship this past session, but he comes back retooled. He's got Alex DeBro as his point guard. He's got Dante Ramos also with him in the backcourt, and then we already talked about it, but Jose Mercado and Obinna Ugokazi as well. And then he brings back Patrick McCarthy, who was a really good piece for him in the fall, I want to say. Fall session it was, and that team really outperformed everybody's expectations. Good shooter, runs the floor well. He's got Javon Taylor, who's a guard out of Fitchburg State, who can really handle it and can come in and heat things up off the bench. And then he brings back Jeff Brito, who's a low volume guy, but hit some big shots in the championship and is a really, really good teammate. So this is a solid team. They're probably going to outperform my expectations, but I think AJ overthought the draft a little bit. He originally was going to pick Marcus Azor, but there were questions around whether Marcus would be around because Marcus is going to play pro somewhere. We don't know where, but he's going to play pro somewhere. So instead of going Mikey Rodriguez or instead of going Kwame Lee, he chose to go Dante Ramos. Now, if we were judging it just based off of how Ramos performed last summer, then I would say that's a great pick. But if you remember, Ramos did play a little bit in the fall, and he just was not the same player in a leading role that he was over last summer, where he had some more help around him. So I don't know that he's a top 3 pick in this draft. I think that you have to take a risk there. If you're not willing to take the risk on Marcus Azor, who had mentioned that he might not be around deep into August, I think you got to take that risk on Mikey Rodriguez there. Or if not, and you do want to play it safe for somebody who you know will be around, you got to go with the 6'8" big guy, Kwame Lee, in my opinion. That's where I think he made his first mistake. And then like all the other captains, I mean, we came back around and he chose Obinna, who Obinna's a great player. He's raw, but he's a great player. He's also 19. And I'm just not sure how, you don't want to risk a top 3 pick on Mikey Rodriguez because you think he might not be there come championship time. I get it. But you get a chance to take him 14th overall and you pass on him again, that one, that's in my book inexcusable here, and I know that that's going to be a recurring theme. So that's what makes me, when I come here, I give them a B minus. Right. I do think that they're going to compete. I do think that they're probably going to catch some teams by surprise, just because that ball is going to be moving so fluidly, and they've got shooters just about every spot on the floor, which is how AJ likes to construct his teams. So they're going to be tough to match up with. But yeah, I just don't know that it's championship material when you consider some of the heavier hitters here in the league. So let's move on here. Nighthawks. This is a sleeper team, right? This is a sleeper team. There's not a lot outside of the Nighthawks camp who might peg them to be true championship contenders. I think that they are. And not just because of Marcus Azor. So when AJ Tavares officially passed on Marcus Azor, Rudy Gene, without hesitation, Rudy Gene, their new captain, he without hesitation snatched Marcus. And then I think he did a nice job pairing him with Ozzie Trail, who is going to stretch the floor, is going to be another great shooter for him. But also, if Marcus needs a breather, or if Marcus wants to move off ball, Ozzie can run the show, right? So you got two really good ball handlers there in the backcourt. And then I like what he did in getting Dimitri Akonda Coronel, right? So, you get a more high usage, forward there, or somebody with size is a little bit more high usage there. And I don't know that they gel as well as I think Dimitri will with Marcus. Dimitri loves to be in positions where he can be a spot up 3-point shooter. I mean, he even made an Instagram post where he talked about how his high school coach wanted him to focus on that, take layups and take 3-pointers. And he's going to get a lot of those with Marcus running the offense. So I love that pick for him in the second round to get Dimitri. And then, this one, you're going to get mixed reviews with getting Amadeus Pires. I'm a big Amadeus fan. I love the energy that he brings. I love the tenacity that he plays with. I think that every team needs that. I'm not saying he's that type. He's the same player, but he brings almost that, Draymond dog to your team. And I think that that's going to bode well for a team that's mostly filled with more quiet guys. I mean, maybe Dimitri will bark a little bit, but you're not going to hear Marcus. Ozzie doesn't strike me as the guy who you're going to hear get into it with anybody. Same with Rudy. But Amadeus is going to be talking the entire game, right? He's going to give that team the sort of backbone and fire or edge that they might need on certain nights. And I think that with Amadeus, if you remember back to the fall, he played superbly. And it's so well that it made him a first-round draft pick in the winter. And he played really well in the fall because he was playing alongside a point guard who he truly respected, which was Jimmy Fritzen. I think Amadeus gets into trouble when he feels the need to grab that rebound and just head down, barrel down the court, right? Which he can do that. But if he's doing that multiple possessions, every game, I'm not sure how effective that is because he's not a great passer out of those situations. So now knowing that he's playing with Marcus Azor, whose reputation precedes him, especially with them both being from Brockton, I think there's going to be no issue with Amadeus getting that rebound, which he's very good at, one of the best at, and then waiting a second because he knows that's Marcus's job to bring the ball down the court and set up the offense, right? And I think if he does that and he really buys in, this is a team. I mean, Marcus is one of those guys who can go out there and he can defend an Aaron or a Mikey. I mean, he's not going to be able to defend both of them, but we'll see what Ozzie can do. I mean, I like the high octane nature of their backcourt, and then I like the shooting that they have with Dimitri. Maybe they throw Dimitri at one of those guys because he's a pretty solid defender himself. So I like Nighthawks. I think that there's no chance that they're not I shouldn't say no chance, there's always a chance, but I would be surprised if they're not a top 4 finisher and for that third spot. I would say it's either going to be them or DBBC. I love what Rudy did with the draft. I give him an A minus there. You look at the bench as well. He's got another, sort of floor general in Josh Rivera. He's got his buddy kind of DK there. We'll have to see what he can bring to the team. And then Casey Iwobi returns. He played last summer for Ballistic. Wasn't featured enough, but he's a great athlete, and he'll bring nice energy off that bench and another lob threat for Marcus. So love what the Nighthawks did. Moving on, Goonies here, reigning champs. Already talked a lot about this squad. They kept Heredia and Almirante, so that they bring back that backcourt along with Tommy, who's truly going to play the 3 now instead of the 4. And then he was able to pick up Arinze Obiora and Kwame Lee as well. So that's one of the more formidable starting lineups that you're going to see in the league. I don't know how well Arinze is going to like playing this session, just because he typically likes to be more of a ball handler. And that's just not going to happen on this squad because of, you've got Heredia, you've got Morante, and then Tommy, like to initiate the offense as well. So Arinze is truly going to be a 4 on that squad. In my experience, I haven't watched him play, that's not his favorite place to be on the court. But if he does buy in, I actually think that's where Arinze excels, is when he is, that 4 who can step out and can handle it. I'm not knocking that part of his game, but he's such a strong finisher around the rim, and he should have plenty of opportunities to score down there. Kwame is going to do what Kwame does as a 6'8" lefty who can shoot and operate with his back to the basket. And then you've got a shooter like Rob Williams coming off the bench. And then 2 really unknowns, Rudy Francois and Mike Noonan. I would say that's probably where the question marks come into play. If they can both perform well, then this grade probably goes up to an A, right along with Ballistic, to be honest. But for right now, I guess the question mark would be, what can Francois and Noonan bring? Because we haven't seen them or seen enough of them. All right. Next up, Kings. This is my man, Shea Coleman, and he's taking over this team. I can't bury Shane, but Shane, I think maybe even more than any other captain, you got to take Mikey Rodriguez here, man. You got to take him on this squad, and he really would have had championship potential if he did that. So taking a look at Shane's draft. So Shane had the 6th overall pick. He took Mo Taylor. I have no problem with that. One of the best athletes. He brings you tremendous size, right? But then on the swing back here, he had a chance to grab Mikey Rodriguez and pair that to have Mikey as the guard, Shane as a wing, and Mo Taylor as your, sort of more versatile big. That trio right there would have been more versatile than any big 3 across the league. But instead, Shane went with Dante Law. Now, Dante's a high flyer. He can get hot from beyond the arc. He's a good player. I like Dante's game. Dante's not Mikey. That's no disrespect. There's a lot of players that aren't Mikey. There's, probably outside of 3-4 players in this league, are just not on Mikey's level. And I just don't really like the fit, right? I mean, he put himself in a position where, no knocks to Mitri Lambright. I think that he's a good point guard. I think to win a championship this session with Aaron Calixte and Mikey Rodriguez and Marcus Azor and guys like that, I think that you need to have a great point guard, or you need to have great point guard play. And I'm not sure that they're going to get that out of Mitri and Nana. Now, I hope that I stand corrected. And maybe the dark horse there could be Hendel Laurel, who I do think was a great pick. I want to say he got him around 6th round, and he's been playing 2 sessions now, so I'm not sure how he goes that late, to be honest. But Tyler Murray is a good pick for them because he can provide some shooting. But I just think that there's a little bit of positional overlap there between Dante and Shane and Tyler. And I haven't seen a lot of what Mo can bring to the table. But Mitri is going to fill it up. He's going to hit a lot of threes. He does that really well. I think having a true floor general with that lead guard spot would have done wonders for this team and made them a true competitor there. And maybe then move, Mitri down into more of a scoring role. But hey, Mitri might surprise me. Mitri might watch this podcast. He might be upset that I put into question his credentials as a floor general, and he might come and ball out this season. I hope that that's the case. But for this squad this season, for Shane, his first go round as a captain, I got to give him a C plus. I really think that he dropped the ball by not grabbing Mikey Rodriguez, and I think he knows that too. I think that he was pumped to the face once he realized when Mikey came back. Still another probably 8 picks later that Mikey came off the board. But moving on to Mambas here, because I know I'm already over the 30 minutes. So Savon Houston is our captain here. He kept his longtime teammate Chris Green. Was going to operate out of the guard spot. And with his first round pick, he took Brian Rudolph. Now, according to Brian, there's no way that he should have slipped to 7th overall. And I got tremendous respect for Brian's game. I've been watching Brian all the way back to the New Bedford days. And I know that he can go, and I know that he's a horse. But I also know, as one of the captains in the room mentioned as well, that, he's coming off of a knee injury. And, Brian's, he's in his 30s, coming off of a knee injury. I think that there's a level of risk that comes with that type of a selection. And I hope that B. Rudolph is fired up, and I hope that he's fully healthy and is able to really come out and kill this summer. But, passing on Mikey Rodriguez there, that's a tough one, right? So, you have Brian Rudolph and you have Chris Green as your backcourt. Well, I think that's solid. I haven't seen a lot of Josh Ferreira, to be entirely honest. There were good reviews from the people who did know his game. So, that could be a sneaky good backcourt there, those three. And then he picked up Ant Parker as his versatile forward, can step out and shoot it a little bit. And, what I do think, though, is that, having off the bench Darian Fernandez and Carlos Bermudez-Glean, I really think he should have went with a wing for one of those picks. If we just take a quick look at the draft board here for Mambas, especially since you already have 2 guards that are under 6 feet, I think coming down here, I think taking a chance on somebody like a Mike Noonan or getting a Javon Taylor, getting a Chris Cherry, somebody along those lines with that pick. For Mambas, I mean, Darian Fernandez, championship pedigree D1 point guard, has played great, the past session, really. But, I would have went or prioritized size there. Got somebody with a little bit more length to guard the wings. Personally. So, all those things with the risk of your first round pick there. And then I think, Parker's coming off of an injury as well. He played a little bit in the fall and he had an injury. So there's a lot of question marks around the health of this team coming into the season. But if they can get it together, they can click, they can be a dark horse. I'm still, not sold here. So I've got them with a C. To be honest, I wanted to put that as a C plus, so that was a mistake. I'll put them at a C plus. I don't think that their draft was particularly worse than Minutemen. But yeah, I don't foresee Mambas being a true championship contender. Prove me wrong. Put that on the bulletin board. Put that in the locker room for you guys. I hope you're fired up by that, but that's my take on it. Lastly here, DBBC, who I already said is my dark horse. Amari Brown, he drafted young boys strictly, right? He's drafted strictly young boys. He went with Aaron Cooley, who's going to be entering his sophomore year at Brown University, 6'6", southpaw, can take it off the dribble, can finish at the rim. He's going to be a matchup nightmare all season long because he's basically going to be a small ball 5 in this offense, but He's really probably a guard at the D1 level. So that's going to be tough when you think about guys like, Kwame Lee and Savon Houston, Zach Turcotte, who are all great players, but having to ask them to step out and defend an Aaron Cooley, that's a long night for them, to be honest, especially whereas the kid's, 19, maybe 20 years old. He's got a lot of tread left on those tires. That's a tough cover. So I like the mismatch that he provides there. Where I'll dissect Amari's draft is that, and I actually love this player, but with his second round pick, he went Miles Powell. Now, I'm not questioning Miles' game. Miles is a great player. I think they have that Hockomock connection. Miles is a Stoughton kid. Amari played at OA. But the reality is, the only other team here that Miles would have even been on their radar would be Ballistic, because he played with Aaron and with Jude last summer. I can promise you that Ballistic was not going to take Miles with their second or third pick, meaning that, Amari could have waited until the third or fourth round. To be honest, he might have been able to wait until the fifth round to get Miles. And again, I'm not saying that Miles is a fifth round talent, but I just don't think that he was on enough people's radars, and he doesn't have the collegiate pedigree that some of these other players do. So I think that was a bit of a reach, where he could have went in, took Mikey Rodriguez and then had a backcourt of himself, Mikey Rodriguez and Aaron Cooley, and then go get Miles later on in the draft. He could have taken an Arinze and had a scary forward duo of Arinze and Aaron Cooley, to go along with Amari, and then pick up Miles as well. But he took Miles way too early. Is where I have to critique his draft. I do like what he did round 3, going and getting a veteran presence for him and Bryce Boggs. I think Bryce Boggs will gel really well with this team. He likes to play fast pace, and he's a very tenacious defender. I think that he'll really corral this group. They're young, so I think there's going to be some times when they get flustered, sometimes where they're not moving the ball the way that they should be, sometimes where they're not putting in the effort defensively that they could be. And I think Bryce Boggs is going to be that vocal leader for them. So I think that was a great pickup. I like Stevie's game as well. I think he has work to do as a shooter, but I think he's a great finisher and a great athlete. So, Amari, Stevie, Miles, Bryce, and Aaron, that team's they're gonna fly up and down the court, absolutely fly up and down the court, and they're gonna be a tough matchup for a lot of teams. And most of the boys are not getting tired either. I mean, even Bryce, who's one of the older guys on the team. And Bryce is not old, but one of the older guys on this team. Bryce is in phenomenal shape. So he's not slowing down. So you for sure know Amari and Stevie and Miles and Aaron are going to. And then you talk about their bench. You've got another high energy, really good defender, Josh Bonney. You've got a veteran and very high IQ big man in Peter Camden, who I think will play well with this squad because he's a pass first big. And then, I think outside of Mikey Rodriguez, the steal of the draft is Keyshawn Jacobs, who went 7th round. And like I said, I would not be surprised if, I don't know if it's going to be over Stevie, I don't know if it's going to be over Miles, or who it is, but I would not be surprised if Keyshawn inserts himself into the starting lineup because of his prowess as a 3-point shooter. What I would knock as far as that starting lineup is, Amari can stroke it. From what I've seen from Stevie and Miles, the 3-point ball is not necessarily their strong suit. Bryce is a better mid-range shooter than he is a 3-point shooter, and I'm not sure on Aaron, but I would say they're not the shooting team. You think about a team like A1, you think about a team like Goonies, think about a team like Ballistic. Those teams are going to be able to shoot the lights out. DBBC does not have that type of shooting prowess, but Keyshawn Jacobs is that guy who can provide that. So I think, get him some good minutes early on there and see the way that he can stroke it. And we might be looking at inserting Keyshawn into that starting lineup alongside Amari and bringing a more high energy guy like Stevie or Miles off the bench. That might actually end up working out better. We'll see. but that's maybe, and I didn't officially give a third hot take. Maybe that's my third hot take, because that Keyshawn is going to have to start at some point for this season. So just draft wise, I give them a B, because I do think that Amari took the young guys too early, and he could have bolstered his roster with them later on. But I like him getting Aaron, and I like him getting Keyshawn with the last pick of the draft. I mean, that's tremendous value there. So uh, that's our draft grades. I'm going to wrap up now quickly here, since I'm way over, with season predictions for the standings. I've got Ballistic in first place. Ballistic, quite frankly, they might go undefeated, to be honest. I don't want to overhype this team, but that backcourt is no joke. There's a lot of pro teams that would not be able to keep up with that backcourt. And with those guys locked in, I know Mikey's going to be locked in. It's going to be tough to match up with them. We'll get to see, though, opening night. Goonies go up against them. Goonies will be a tough matchup for them, because what Ballistic lacks in size, that's where Goonies' strength is going to be, when you have Tommy Hubbard, Arinze Obiora, and Kwame Lee as your front court. So that'll be an interesting matchup. The next two are a toss-up, DBC and Nighthawks. Nighthawks might actually be the safer pick there, but I like up-tempo teams, and I think DBBC is going to be one of the better up-tempo teams in the league. So take your pick there, 3, 4, but I think those will be your top 4. And then 5 through 8, A1, Kings, Mambas, and then Minutemen is how I have it shaking out. So I was very wrong last summer. I think I had DBBC as the number 1 or number 2 team. They ended up being just about dead last. I did pretty much hit the nail on the head, however, with Ballistic and with the Ultimate Champions, Koba. So let's see how we do this summer. In any case, pull up. Summer Hoops is going to be tipping off tonight, 7 o'clock at the Dana Barros Basketball Club. We're going to have games across all 3 divisions, all 3 men's divisions, which will be Legacy, Elite, and Collegiate. We'll be having games at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, all 5 courts, and then 9 o'clock on 3 of the courts. We'll be having games. There's going to be a lot of dunks, people putting it on others' heads, a lot of ankles being taken, and a lot of exciting finishes for sure this summer. So please, by all means, pull up. Once again, appreciate all the support. And that's it for this episode of Around the League BYO Hoops.